was ubiquitous. He was in hallways. He was roaming about, going into classes, talking to students, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, whenever you saw Dr. Largmann in the hallways carrying a yellow legal pad, you knew that he was going to go observe a teacher in a very formal way for a full period. But in any event, one story that comes to mind quickly that kind of shows the difference between the two is Largman would from time to time, apparently he would be at the door at dismissal, and he'd be talking to students as they were leaving the building. And in the old building, there was a front door and there was a back door. And so one afternoon, he's by the back door and he's talking to students as they're leaving. And the question he liked to ask kids was, "Tell me one thing that you learned in school today." So he stops this one young man and he asks him that question, "Tell me one thing you learned in school today." And he said the kid didn't miss a beat, looked right at him. He said, "Always go out the front door." So Largman was all over the place, and everybody knew him, of course. I'm teaching at August Martin High School. I'm teaching a junior class. Knock on the door. Open up the door. It's the principal, Arthur Kesselman, who's been the principal there forever. But you never saw him outside of his office. I mean, I saw him twice the year I was there. And once was when he knocked on the door, and another time he was showing a group of administrators from other schools around the building, and he stopped into my class. And they sat there and they watched me for a while, and then they left, and he gave me the kind of thumbs up. That was the only really evaluation I got from him. In any event, he comes in. He says, "Is it okay? I need to speak to the juniors, so I'm going around to the classes to speak." I said, "Of course it's okay. It's you're the principal. Come on in." He comes in. He's talking to these juniors, and a little girl in the back raises her hand, and he says, "Yes, what do you have a question?" She says, "Yes." She says, "Who are you?" And this is a junior who's been in there for 3 years. Here's the principal who's been there the whole time, and this kid didn't even know who the principal was. So you get this Logman all over the place, and then you get Kesselman, who doesn't come out of his office hardly at all. So very, very different. I want to focus on Dr. Largman, the man, the myth, the legend from Townsend Harris High School. Here's a picture of Dr. Largman. Fairly diminutive person, let's say. But he was very well respected, and in many quarters he was feared. He was tough. The first time I met Dr. Largman was when he was interviewing me for the position, and he asked me to describe a lesson that I have done recently. So I was talking about a lesson I did on China, and in the middle of me talking about this, he just interrupts and says, "Name the countries that border China." Put me on the spot. So I did. Now, in retrospect, he probably had no idea what those countries were, but I rattled off a bunch of countries that bordered China. So, okay, continue. So that was the first time I met Dr. Logman. I never had in an interview anybody ever ask me a question like that. Just try to put me on the spot, see what I knew. So that was the first time I met him. Logman was famous for, as I said, being around the building, walking around, poking his head into classes, walking in, spending 10 minutes in the classroom, then leaving, or just standing in the doorway, whatever. And if you saw something you didn't like, you'd get a note in your mailbox, no matter what it could be. It could be that you were sitting down, which he didn't like, or it could have been that could have been anything he didn't like. He'd leave you a note, and we used to call those notes lograms. And he would leave them. He would leave them in your mailbox, for you. And I'm sure I got my share of lograms over the year. One I can remember. I'd been there for a number of years now. We were in the new building, and there was a new contractual obligation that we had in exchange for a raise, and we had to do these duties. I forget what they called them. There was a number or something around any of that. Everybody had to do a duty in the building, and so mine was the social studies, the humanities department book room. I had to manage that, which didn't require really you to do anything. Keep it on. You would unlock at the beginning of the semester. Books would be taken out, and then you'd lock it up. At the end of the semester, the books come back. You put them back in. So at the end of the year, he sends out a notice that we have to write a report on this duty that we did. Write a report, a formal report. So I said, you know what? He's got everybody in the building writing these reports. I said, there's no way, to myself, there's no way he's going to read all these things. So I let the kind of creative juices flow. And I put things in the report like, at one point the books tried to escape the room and I was able to corral them and keep them in there. I went looking for the copies of Anne Frank's diary, and I couldn't find them anywhere. And I finally found them hidden up in the up in the top shelf in the corner somewhere behind a bunch of other books. And the Karl Marx books were trying to get the other books to have a general strike. And I'm writing all this kind of nonsense stuff. Hand it in, when it was due, along with everybody else. And then, sure enough, 2 days later, I get a loggram, and it said, "Tony, very funny. Now write a real report." So I had to write like a 3-page report about the book room. So anyway, he checked everything. My first year there, I was told I had to do a bulletin board, so I did the bulletin board. I'm not artistic at all, so I did the bulletin board as best I could. A day later, he told me take it down, put up another one. So I had to get a couple of students to do that. He came down one time to watch a fencing match, which I thought was pretty nice. This was in the old building, in the cafetorium of the old building. We're having a fencing match, and we had just started to get good. I'll talk more about fencing later on, but I had these two fencers who would, before the match would begin, they'd go off by themselves and they would pray, and then they would come back and we the match would start, and he sees them. He comes over to me. He says, "Tony," he says, "what are they doing?" I said, "They're praying." He said, "You allow that?" I said, "No, I allow that." I said, "Yeah, I can't disallow that." I said, "Yeah, and you know what? They're winning. So as long as they're winning, they can pray all that they could pray all they want." But he was concerned that I was in violation of the First Amendment, which obviously is absurd. Uh, he observed one of my classes. Now in Townsend Harris, the principal observed you twice a year, and whether you were tenured or not didn't matter. Twice a year, the principal would observe you full period, unannounced, and your chairperson would observe you at least 2 other times, maybe more, unannounced. So I'm teaching a research class, and we're in a computer lab, and the kids are at that stage. They're building bibliographies. So they're searching for sources. When they find source material, they are, they're going to put it into their bibliography. So he's walking around the room, and he's talking to the kids. And he asked this one girl comes to me after class to tell me what transpired with Dr. Largmann. He asked her, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm building a bibliography." He says, "Well, I don't see you writing anything down." She says, "Well, I'm finding the source material, and then I'm just I just cut and paste it into a Word document." And he said to her, "Well, where are your scissors? Where's your glue?" She said to me, I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if he was kidding or if he was serious. He was serious. He had no idea what cut and paste meant. This was the kind of early days, I should point out, the early days of computer use. So he really didn't know what cut and paste meant. And he thought if you cut and paste, you're going to cut it with a scissor and then you're going to glue it and put it. So uh, that was cut and paste with Dr. Largmann. Now, one of the issues we had at Townsend Harris when we did the observations, there were no bells at Townsend Harris. So classes started and ended at the same time, which is kind of interesting. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. You either started your class late or you ended your class early, and that was always noted in your observation report, and that was that. So one day I'm I'm on my way to class up on the sixth floor, which is the top floor of the building. And my classroom was kind of in the middle of the hallway. And I look down the hallway and I see one of my students. It was a girl. I forget. I wish I could remember who it was. And she sees me. I see her, obviously. She sees me. And so we're both heading to class. And we're both late. Uh, so she starts walking faster because she knows the unwritten rule is if you get to class before the teacher does, you can't possibly be late. So she starts walking faster. And so, okay, I start walking faster. She walks faster. I walk faster. She starts to run. I start to run. And now it's a dead sprint to the classroom. She's coming from one end, I'm coming from the other, and we're converging on the classroom. We get to the classroom was on my right, her left. We get to the classroom, the door is open, and I turn to go in. She turns to go in, and standing right there is Dr. Largmann, little Dr. Largmann. Had I run into him, I don't know. I would have done definitely would have done some damage because I was going as fast as I could go. She just kind of slips right by him and scurries off to her seat. I stop dead in my tracks, and Largman looks up at me and says, "You're late." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I am," but it didn't matter. It was an election simulation class. It was a campaign. The campaign manager had already started the class. He was sitting up front on top of the desk telling this group, you got to write this speech and you got to look that on top of the desk telling this group, you got to write this speech and you got to look that up and so on. So the class was going. I didn't even need to be there. In any event, that was some of the things that happened between me and administrators over the years. And that's it for this installment. I'll be back again with another one next time. I think maybe next time I take a look at some of the interesting colleagues that I have worked with over the years. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, and be back in a week.